Hello and welcome to the She Reads Romance Books podcast, the ultimate show for romance book lovers looking for the best books worth reading. I'm your host, Leslie Murphy, and in each short episode, I share my favorite book list of recommendations so you know exactly what to add to your must-read list. Join me as I explore the romance genre and have fun collecting book boyfriends along the way, because life is better with a love story. Hello, readers. Welcome back to the She Reads Romance Books podcast, where I help you find the best romance books worth reading. Typically around this time of the month, I share my most anticipated new romance books releases that are coming out in June. But I took a look at my list and oh my gosh, there are so many great books coming out in June 2024. And I do have my list of most anticipated June releases up on shereadsromancebooks.com. So I'm going to put a link to that list in the show notes because I thought, since I've already talked about several of those books on the podcast in various episodes before, that I would sort of use today's episode for a different idea. So this has been sort of percolating in my mind for some time. Hopefully it's of interest to you, but I've got to thinking about the romance genre and how it has really been a staple in publishing for decades, right? But its popularity has truly, I feel, skyrocketed in recent years with really no end in sight. I mean, you only need to take a look at the New York Times bestseller list to see how popular the genre has become. There are so many titles taking their place in the top 10, top 15, actually, each and every week on that list. Now, I greatly attribute the pandemic, where we were all just sort of stuck at home for months on end reading love stories to make us feel good when the world was truly falling apart, as a contributing factor for this resurgence of the genre, as well as, people jumping on Book Talk during the pandemic and continuing really to do so to talk about romance books as another sort of recent contributing factor for the emergence of millions of new fans, I think, to the genre, or at least millions of new fans that are willing to talk about it and really go out and buy books. But I think truly that there are several romance books throughout these last few decades that truly stand out, or maybe I shouldn't say decades, that really stand out in recent history that stands out as having the biggest impact on the genre's success. And that's what today's episode is going to be about. I picked 11 romance books that have had the biggest impact on the romance genre. Now, while this list of romance books with the biggest impact on the genre is purely based on my assessment and observations, because there are truly, I think, many, many books that have all played a role in the genre's ascension and continued success. Of course, the giants, I think, of the genre, like Nora Roberts, Judith McNaught, have all had their impact, but the books that I'm highlighting in this list have all played, to my mind, a special, unique, and particular role that I wanted to highlight. I'll actually be really curious to know if you agree with me on my selections, or at least my reasonings for their selections. If you have a strong opinion on which romance book had the biggest impact on the genre, I'd love for you to share it in the comments on the blog or on YouTube, wherever you're finding this list, and let's discuss. I think it would be great. So to kick things off, the first romance book that has had the biggest impact on the genre is Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. This romance was published in 1813, and it is still widely known today, 2 centuries later. Talk about a romance book that has stood the test of time. It's the ultimate, enemies to lovers romance, which is such a popular trope today, where Elizabeth Bennet finds eligible bachelor Fitzwilliam Darcy to be arrogant and conceited on their first meeting, while he is indifferent to her good looks and lively mind and looks down on her crazy family. Since its immediate success in 1813, Pride and Prejudice has remained one of the most popular novels in the English language,
It's such a classic, but truly one of the books to influence and impact the genre because of its popularity, longevity, and staying power really throughout the years. While this one stands out the most to me, really all of Jane Austen's books have had such an impact on the romance book genre. So thank you, Jane, for really kicking things off for us so many, many years ago. The next romance book that I believe had a big impact on the romance genre is The Notebook by Nicholas Sparks. This was Nicholas Sparks' first novel about Noah Calhoun, who returned to coastal North Carolina after World War II and is haunted by images of the girl he lost more than a decade earlier. It is such a wonderful second chance romance that catapulted Sparks' popularity, as all of his books have been New York Times bestsellers, with over 130 million copies sold worldwide in more than 50 languages, including over 92 million copies in the United States alone. I mean, that's a lot of books, people. The Notebook, it was published in 1996 and is considered one of PBS's great American reads. Of course, the 2004 film starring Ryan Gosling and Rachel McAdams is just as famous as the book and remains the most lucrative Nicholas Sparks adaptation to date, earning over 116 million worldwide. Plus, all of these years later, after its initial release, you can now experience Noah and Allie's epic romance as a Broadway musical. Gosh, I would love to go see it. Anyone near New York should go check it out. So The Notebook, to my mind, really made Sparks one of those iconic romance authors of the time, along with Nora Roberts, when it was really just a few big names who kept churning out those traditionally published romance books. So that's why The Notebook earns a spot on this list. The next book is without a doubt one of the biggest romance books that has impacted the genre, and that is Twilight by Stephenie Meyers. Twilight released in 2005, and this young adult paranormal romance that weaves in forbidden romance and suspense, where a teenage girl falls in love with a vampire, sparked what is considered a literary phenomenon and redefined romance for a generation, according to the New York Times. I mean, you just have to look at the numbers for this book to see how widely successful it and this whole entire book series has been. So the Twilight series became an international bestseller, right? With more than 160 million copies sold as of 2021, according to Publishers Weekly. Twilight is fifth among 150 best-selling print books between 2004 and 21, according to Publishers Weekly. And that, my gosh, is definitely a ton of books, you guys. USA Today declared Meyer Author of the Year, citing that she had done something that no one else had in the 15 years of the USA Today best-selling book list. She swept the top 4 slots in 2008, and she did it again in 2009. Altogether, her books have spent over 303 weeks on the New York Times bestselling list. Plus, as we all know, the books were adapted into 5 blockbuster movies, which grossed $3.4 billion worldwide. So not only is Twilight, I think, one of the romance books to have the biggest impact on the genre because of just the ginormous number of books sold, but because of its impact on the young adult genre. Some say that it is the book that has made the young adult genre and young adult romance genre what it is today, and why one even exists today, because it was one of those first books really to bridge that gap between children's chapter books and adult books. Plus, Twilight made sexy vampires and paranormal romance even more popular after Anne Rice had made vampires popular with her books many years prior to that. So, without a doubt, Twilight will forever be a romance book that had a huge impact on the genre that continues today. The next book, like Twilight, will be of no surprise why it's on this list given its impact on the genre, and that is 50 Shades of Grey by E.L. James. It is the romance book that really brought erotic romance and BDSM romance to the fore when readers fell for Christian Grey and his particular erotic interests that he shows to innocent literature student Anastasia Steele. 50 Shades of Grey released in 2011 and became an instant New York Times bestseller. The 50 Shades trilogy has sold more than 165 million copies worldwide, spent 133 weeks on the New York Times bestseller list, and of course was adapted into a popular movie franchise series as well. Now, 50 Shades of Grey sits at the number 3 spot of the top-selling books from 2004 to 2021, according to that Publishers Weekly list. So just a few spots above Twilight. Now, this book forever changed and impacted the genre for 2 main reasons. One, it brought a huge focus to fan fiction. 50 Shades of Grey began as a work of Twilight fan fiction. Again, thank you, Twilight, which James called Master of the Universe. With the book's publication, James became the most commercially successful fanfiction author of all time. Plus, as we know, 50 Shades of Grey helped popularize aspects of BDSM practice and brought erotic romance into the commercial and cultural mainstream. It proved that readers want a love story with some spicy elements and they're not afraid to show it. So without a doubt, 50 Shades of Grey has had a huge, huge impact on the romance genre. Now, the next book to have an impact on the genre is another romance that started as fan fiction, and that is After by Anna Todd. It popularized spicy new adult romance, that time period between, high school and I'll say later adulthood, when Tessa goes off to college with a dependable boyfriend waiting at home and her life and career neatly planned out, only to meet Hardin on her first day of campus. Now, after it released in 2014, which, as I said, it started out as a One Direction fan fiction piece that Todd started writing on her phone on Wattpad. The After series has since been released in 35 languages and sold over 12 million copies worldwide, becoming a #1 bestseller in several countries. This book not only, I think, catapulted the new adult romance genre or category, but it also became the Wattpad platform's most read series with over 2 billion reads. In prior years, the only romance stories really that you were reading were those romance books published by traditionally publishing houses, right? But the rise of fan fiction on the internet with platforms like Wattpad, the romance genre really became more widely available and more diverse and more widespread. So that is why After made my list. The next book to impact the romance genre is It Ends With Us by Colleen Hoover. Her first at least independently published book that she wrote based on her mother and soon to be motion picture releasing this summer. It's a book that had a resurgence thanks to the pandemic and Book Talk, and that really launched Colleen Hoover as the It romance author in 2022. And as I said, Colleen Hoover was first an independently published author, and now she's obviously picked up by traditionally publishing houses. Hoover has sold over 20 million copies of her books, including It Ends With Us, but also popular books like Verity, Reminders of Him, Ugly Love Without Merit, It Starts With Us, and November 9, just to name a few. More than Dr. Seuss ever sold, and more than the number of Bible copies that sold in 2022. By the end of 2022, Hoover held 6 books out of the top 10 in the New York Times bestseller paperback list, and she even made it to the Times top 100 most influential people list in April of 2023. Now, this book and Colleen Hoover, given the amount of books she sold, really spotlighted how much people were reading romance and how many books were flying off the shelves when other genre sales were decreasing at that time. It Ends With Us also really opened the doors, I think, to other independently published authors because of its success, with so many indie authors since now being picked up by traditionally published publishers and having their books in bookstores within this last year alone. I feel like I'm constantly getting newsletters or seeing social posts from indie authors that I follow with announcements that their books or series have been picked up by a publisher. It's amazing and such a huge trend for the genre, which I think, Colleen Hoover's books really set the stage for. Plus, it ends with us really changed the genre and how authors really use social media, right, to sell their books, and how social media can really make or break a bestseller. So it ends with us, definitely one of those books that had a huge impact on the romance genre. The next book on my list of romance books with the biggest impact is The Duke and I by Julia Quinn. This is the first book in her Bridgerton series, historical romance novels that follow the Bridgerton siblings and their love stories while trying to stay out of the social papers of Lady Whistledown. The first being about Daphne, the eldest sister, in her fake courtship with Simon until they end up falling in love with one another. Now, this book released in 2000 and became popular at that time, with Julia Quinn known as a must-read historical romance author to those who loved historical romance. But it's had a really big influence on the genre with its success as a TV series on Netflix. Now, after Bridgerton debuted on Netflix in December of 2020, the steamy drama became the #1 ranked title globally. In its first 28 days, Bridgerton was watched by 82 million member households. That means that roughly 40% of Netflix subscribers watched it, and as a result, at that time, it had the biggest ever debut for an original series on a streaming service. The show's successful debut, of course, can partly be attributed to timing, given we were all homebound in December 2020 due to the pandemic and binge watching TV, but it was such a grandiose show, given that it has Shonda Rhimes at the helm and someone who really championed diversifying the cast. The show's success, I think, has only improved the romance genre's appeal across readership, and it's proven that romance TV series can be widely successful. So much of TV has been sci-fi and fantasy, but Bridgerton series is just as, or if not more so, successful, which is why so many other romance books have been picked up for series and movies in recent years since the show's debut. So The Duke and I and the entire Bridgerton series definitely having a great impact on the romance genre. Another book that saw wide success from Book Talk during the pandemic was Ice Planet Barbarians by Ruby Dixon. Her alien romance about a woman abducted from Earth who then falls for the blue alien on the ice planet that she finds herself on. This book was originally self-published in 2015, and it has spawned like 20 plus more books in the series and spin-offs since book one's release. Given its huge success and popularity on Book Talk, Ice Planet Barbarians had reached the 5th most sold book on Amazon, with Barbarian Alien became the 11th most sold. And Ice Planet Barbarians was picked up by Berkley to be available in bookstores. Now, I included this book on the list because of what its popularity has done to spotlight the variety in the romance genre. You don't have to have a contemporary romance, a historical romance, or even a young adult or erotic romance to become a hit with readers, as past books on this list are. You can write an alien romance and readers are totally down for it and are going to buy it. So this book not only showed how popular, again, independent publishing has grown and where it can lead, but also that the romance book genre doesn't fit just certain boxes. It can include alien and monster romance, Omegaverse romance, and so much more. And so I really appreciate that about Ice Planet Barbarians by Ruby Dixon. Another book and author to really impact the romance genre as of late is Beach Read by Emily Henry. Henry's debut adult romance released in 2020, again, prime time during the pandemic, about two opposites falling in love, an acclaimed author of literary fiction and a best-selling romance author. Emily Henry has sold at least 2.4 million books, with her books spending weeks on the New York Times bestsellers list. 3 of her books have been optioned for films, and honestly, it just seems like readers cannot get enough of her. Beach Read and all of Emily Henry's books have made a huge impact on the genre because her books appeal to just this wide range of readers. People who wouldn't say that they read romance, but will hands down read whatever Emily Henry publishes each year. She has made romance mainstream for so many readers, and I love that about her and her books. So Beach Read itself is about one character who looks down on the romance genre and the other character defending it as a genre equal to literary fiction, right? Beach Read also stands out as one of the books to really change the look of romance book covers going forward, which I think has been at least played a huge impact on the genre. I mean, Beach Read has this yellow, hand-drawn, more graphic cover, which I think really ushered in a wave of romance book covers embracing this trend and moving away, at least for some, from those model-based covers. This trend, I think, has made picking up a romance book a bit easier for some folks who otherwise wouldn't grab a romance book because of its cover. It's proving in a way that people do judge a book and a genre by its cover, and how a book cover can really appeal to, an atypical reader of that genre. So I think Beach Read and all of Emily Henry's books have had a great impact on the romance genre just from the, vast amount of readers that she has brought to the genre with her books. The 10th book on my list of romance books with the biggest impact on the genre goes to Red, White, and Royal Blue by Casey McQuiston. This is her debut romance about America's first son falling in love with the Prince of Wales, which released in 2019 and became an instant New York Times and USA Today bestseller. It was a Goodreads Choice Award winner for Best Debut and Best Romance of 2019 and made many of the Best of the Year book lists, including my own for 2019. I had to include Red, White, and Royal Blue on this list because I think it really impacted the rise of queer and LGBTQ plus romance books in the genre. I mean, of course, there were queer romance books before this one, but ever since 2019, I feel like we have just seen a true, real increase in the number of queer romance books that are particularly traditionally published. It's phenomenal how much easier it is to put together my list of new queer romance book releases for the year than in past recent years, because there's just so many that are being published. And I think that's wonderful, and I love it. The movie, which released in 2023, also only increased the notion that romance books are great material for TV series and movies, and we will hopefully see more and more of these to come, which, if my list of romance books to movies in the works shows, we absolutely will and have a bunch to see in the future. Now, the last book on my list of books that have the biggest impact on the genre, of course, is Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros. Yes, we had young adult fantasy books that readers adore before Fourth Wing, but man, have readers flocked to her romantasy about a girl thrown into the Riders Quadrant who bonds with dragons and falls for her enemy, the one person who should want to see her perish at the War College, but who actually helps her thrive. So Fourth Wing is still on the New York Times bestseller list, as is the second book in the Empyrean series, Iron Flame, and I'm sure both books are going to stay there throughout this year until book 3, Onyx Storm, releases in January of 2025. Fourth Wing was already optioned for TV before its release in 2023, and it has topped so many best of the year lists, it's not even funny. I mean, the list just goes on and on and on. This book really put romantasy on the map. Sure, as I said, we had fantasy romance books and popular romance books before Fourth Wing, but Fourth Wing really made people not familiar with fantasy romance stop and take notice, and it even spawned this new term, romantasy, which has truly taken off. I cannot tell you how many people I've heard say that they don't typically read fantasy or fantasy romance, but they loved Fourth Wing. So to say that this book has had a huge impact on the genre, I think is really an understatement. We're going to be seeing more and more romantasy titles because of it for years to come, I have a feeling. Now, so many books have played their part in building up and impacting the romance genre, but these 11 books really stood out to me for their role that they played and continue to play for many of them in drawing in new readers to the genre, legitimizing the genre in the eyes of other readers, and selling many books and keeping romance very well represented on the New York Times bestseller list. I have been reading romance for so long, I cannot wait to see which books are going to have just as much of an impact on the genre as these, or even more so in the future to come. But before I go, if you want to talk about these books or other great romance books with people who love the romance genre as much as you do, please consider joining the She Reads Romance Books book club. We are a group of romance book readers who love to read and talk about romance, particularly romance books that have a huge impact on the genre. We get together every month online to talk about our book of the month, and we get together online with the book's author as well. So it's such a fun and unique opportunity to really connect with other readers and authors of the genre we love so much. Just visit shereadsromancebooks.com/book club and join us today. You can also join my Facebook group, the She Reads Romance Books Reader Lounge, for more community with fellow romance book readers as well. So be sure to join the Readers Lounge. Would love to see you in that as well. And if you liked this list of romance books with the biggest impact on the genre, then please share a review on your favorite podcast platform. I would just love it so much. So thank you. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode. It was really fun just reflecting back on these books that have just helped the genre that I love so much flourish. As always, I hope you turn in again for the next episode. But in the meantime, happy reading, because life is better with a love story. That's all for this episode of the She Reads Romance Books podcast. I hope you enjoyed it and found some new books to add to your TBR list. If you did, please subscribe, rate, and review the show on your favorite podcast app. It really helps me reach more romance book lovers like you, and I appreciate your support. If you're a book boyfriend collector like me, then you'll want to join my email list so you never miss a podcast episode or a new book list. Just visit shereadsromancebooks.com/join and sign up today. As a thank you, I'll instantly send you my list of top 10 book boyfriends that will make you swoon. Trust me, you don't want to miss this list. Thank you for listening, and until next time, happy reading.